Hi, everyone. We have a lot of information to cover today, so I'm going to go ahead and get started, and I'll pass it on to Carmen.
Hey everybody, I just want to give everybody a warm welcome. Thank you all for coming out, and especially Brian for having this session with us. And thank you, Dr. Augustine, for really getting this together and really doing a lot of the legwork with this workshop. So I just want to say a little bit about ABFMP. So it's Association of Black Family Medicine Physicians. We are an organization that aims to really help increase diversity as well as just combat health issues in African American and Black spaces and then in the diaspora for the United States and the world, especially in regards to health. We think family medicine is especially keen to do that. It is not somewhere that is like exclusionary, so we accept everybody of all races and everything. We do different workshops like this to help further people's understanding of family medicine, so help med students applying to residencies, help family medicine physicians understand different areas of improvement or other workshops that could be related to their practice or their clinic. So just thank you everybody for coming out. I'm really excited about this session today. I'm going to put links in the chat for our Twitter and our website, so you can stay up to date with any current information. Thanks.
Perfect. So I want to get started by answering a question that a lot of people always ask, and that is that this session is being recorded, and all the slides and the recording are going to be made available afterwards. I'm going to actually post at the end of the session a survey. Basically, it's going to collect your email addresses, and then there'll just be 2 questions, very, very brief 2 questions, just to ask you for feedback on the session itself. I also kind of want to go into how you can actually use this presentation. So I know ranking is almost here. And so, it's very important that you take any of the information that Brian Groves presents today and you use it to consider which programs how you're going to rank programs, or maybe if there's programs you shouldn't rank at all, because if they don't meet the visa requirements that you have, you should not rank them. Another thing is that I definitely highly recommend that you reach out to any residents that are currently at the programs that you decide that you're interested in, and find out which ones are foreign medical graduates that came from programs outside of the US, or maybe they were in the US, but they're on a student visa. So talk with these residents and kind of use the information you got from this presentation to kind of talk to them about next steps and what kind of expectations you should expect from their programs. And the last thing, a lot of you submitted questions to us. We are so thankful for that. That helped us to guide this presentation. We're going to try and answer a lot of them with the presentation that he has today. Any questions that aren't answered specifically by the presentation, we're going to try and answer them at the end. And then if there's any new questions that you guys come up with, feel free to chime in and let us know. But we're going to hold questions till the end because we want to make sure that everything gets covered. So with that, I'm going to introduce our speaker today. So this is Brian Groves. He's basically the director of the International Students and Scholars Office at the University of California, San Francisco in Sanford, California, United States. So over 20 years of experience in a variety of academic settings. He specializes in exchange visitor and employment visas for higher education. He has academic and professional experience in public policy and immigration compliance. And he knows all about F1 visas, J1, H1B, O, free trade visas. He's very well-versed in all of these things. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Brian so that he can start his presentation.
Great, thanks, Dr. August. Experience means old. So I'll, if you could let me share my screen. I'm going to try if I can do that.
Yeah, Steve,
Yeah,
are you able to take it over, or do I have to stop?
I think you have to stop if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Cheers. Okay. Let me go ahead and start. All right. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us. We have a lot of information to go over in terms of immigration and about the programs. You know, I think this is a very intimidating time for a lot of people. A lot of things are happening all at once. You know, as we said, our goal is to try to give you as much information as possible, but I also want to comment on that this is an attainable goal. Last year, the Educational Commission on Foreign Medical Graduates, ECFMG, issued more J1 visas, documents for trainees than ever before. And so it appears that US programs are actively seeking international medical graduates. So I think there's a big role you have to play in the US health. And I just want to say that to start out. But then we're going to talk about all the little visa issues. And I hope it's not too overwhelming, but we'll of course take questions at the end. Very simply, we're going to give a basic immigration overview for those of you who may not be experienced in immigration in general and obtaining visas. We're going to talk about common visa types for clinical training. We're going to talk about the basic visa application process, and then we're going to provide available resources. You know, it is confusing, right? So in terms of an overview, we're going to talk about specifically, you know, what is a visa, the US agencies involved with visa issuance, the IMG institutional stakeholders for training, the visa application process, and common visa types for clinical training. First off, you know, just what is a visa? I just want to say the visa itself is a document that's put in your passport by a consulate that allows you entry into a question. It also tells you how. It also tells the border when you're coming across the border, what is your purpose for coming to the United States. So the visa stamp is something that's just in your passport that is issued by a consulate. That is different than status. Some of you may be in the United States already as an F1 student, or you may be on a J1 research program. And so you may have your status in the United States. So I think just very simply, there's a difference between, it's important to understand that the visa is what lets you into the United States. It's issued by a US Department of State at a US consulate abroad. It's only renewable abroad. It's not renewable in the United States. It's solely for the purpose of entry, so it doesn't allow. It only allows you to enter for the activity that falls under that classification. Visas can expire while someone's in the United States. That's fine as long as their status remains active. So the status is granted when you enter the United States by U.S. Customs and Border Protection. It's granted. It's possible to extend your status in the United States even if your visa is expired, and legal status depends on the validity of your actual documents of your program, and you can't let your status expire. Your visa can expire, but your status can't expire. So that's just very different because you'll hear the difference between visa and status. So it's important to understand the difference between the two concepts. There's a lot of federal agencies, and we're not going to go through them all. And there's a lot of acronyms we throw around. You know, you think in medicine, there's a lot of acronyms. In immigration, there's a lot of acronyms too. But we'll talk about some of the basic agencies involved in immigration. I mean, of course, the biggest one in the United States, the most impactful for many of you, will be the Department of Homeland Security, which has a lot of different functions, particularly the Citizenship and Immigration Service, who approves benefits for those coming into the U.S. Specifically, when we talk about visas, work visas like H-1B visas. We have Immigration Customs Enforcement. It's called ICE. And it does a lot of things, but it's basically very important for the J program in that it manages the government database that issues the forms for J visas, the DS-2019s. It's also the law enforcement arm of the Department of Homeland Security. And then finally, the other agency that's impactful is Customs and Border Protection. Those are the officers you meet when you enter the United States, and they'll determine if you're, they'll determine the status that you're entering the United States and stamp your passport with entry. So they authorize admission to the United States. Other agencies, probably the next important agency would be the Department of State, which oversees the J program in general and issues the visa stamps in their passport, among other things. For H-1Bs, there are two other departments that are impactful. One is the Department of Labor, and the other is the Department of Commerce. Slightly, the Department of Commerce isn't as impactful. But those are some of the agencies you may deal with in coming to the United States. When we talk about the process, we're going to talk about this in general, so you get an idea of what this should look like. Your sponsor will initially invite you to participate in the program, and then your sponsor will issue legal documents, a DS-2019 for the J program, or H-1B approval notice for H-1B. Then you will be responsible for making an appointment at a U.S. consulate. One person asked, do you have to do it in your home country? And we'll talk about that later. That's one of the questions below. So you'll make an appointment, you'll pay for the fees, and we'll talk about the fees in a minute too. And then the consulate will, you'll have an interview with the consulate, the visa will be issued, and then you'll enter the United States and be granted status upon admission. I think where it gets confusing a little bit is that each training program, each training institution has different ways of processing immigration documents. So I think in terms of what you can do now is try to understand for your desired training programs, who in their institution is handling the immigration. First off, the typical stakeholders at any training institution will be the IMG themselves, the training departments, and you probably know this, but the most important people to know in the training department are the program directors, which are under the ACGME accreditation documents. There's a named program director, and then the training coordinator, which is also part of the ACGME accreditation. In some cases, it could be a department manager handling it, but in terms of the way the program's recognized, the two most important people to know about your training at that institution are the program director and the training coordinator. And then we have, for J visas, who is processing the visa on behalf of the institution working with ECFMG. And that person is called, or people are called, training program liaisons, TPLs, and they can be in a variety of different offices. Unfortunately, no one institution handles this the same way. In many institutions, it's human resources that handles the H-1B applications or ECFMG J1 applications. It could be the graduate medical education. That's another popular one. In very few circumstances, it's the international office. But at our institution, it is our office that handles all the clinical, the immigration for clinical trainees. So it's important, I think, to figure out where in the institution, who in the institution will be handling your immigration. And again, we'll talk about that as we go down. We're going to talk about some of the appropriate visas for clinical training. And these pretty much encompass 99% of all training in the United States, and that would be the J alien physician category. So the J1 has many different types of category. The J1 visa program has many different types of category, but the alien physician specifically for clinical training. There's the H-1B, which is a work visa. It's also known as a specialty occupation visa. Some of you who are in who students in the United States, either medical students or in other programs, I noticed in the questions that several of you are here on MPH programs. You would have optional practical training available to you after you graduate from your program. And then in some cases, there are other visa statuses that may be appropriate. E3 and O1, which we're not going to spend too much time, but we will talk about them a little bit as we go down. So what's unique about the J-Alien position? It's for clinical trainees only, as opposed to the other J1 visa types. Most US training programs in the United States only support J1 status. And so that's an important factor, an important detail that you should know about your training program. ECFMG is the only J1 program sponsor. So for those of us, if you're doing a research program or a postdoc in the United States, we would use a different J category, the research scholar, which the institution itself would sponsor. But only ECFMG is permitted by the Department of State to issue these J1 alien physician, J1 alien physician category. There's a total of 7 years of eligibility in this category for training. It's only for accredited and board certified programs. And there's a strict requirement to return home for 2 years before being eligible to immigrate to the US. This is known as the 212E rule or the 2-year home country rule. And we'll talk about that in detail as we go through the slides. So the other major visa we've talked about is the H-1B specialty occupation visa. This is an employment visa, so it's not specifically for clinical trainees. We use H-1B for faculty. We use H-1B for researchers. We use H-1B for a lot of for even staff members at UCSF. So it's not specifically for clinical training, but it may be available to you. It's not appropriate necessarily for all trainees, and that's usually a determination by your training program. There's a total of 6 years of eligibility in most cases in H-1B status. It's also significantly more expensive to acquire, and it's much more heavily regulated than the J program, and it's very time consuming in comparison to the J alien position. But it is it's a popular visa type in that there's no requirement to return to your home country. And it's also something known as a dual intent visa, which doesn't require you to, which also allows you to be on it's a non-immigrant visa that allows you to be on an immigrant track to the United States. It doesn't, and we'll talk about that in detail as we go on. Finally, if you're in the United States in a F1 visa, so in a degree program in the United States, you probably are already aware about optional practical training, which is granted after you graduate, or it can be before, but in certain cases. But it's generally used after you graduate. Work authorization is up to 12 months of eligibility. You can apply for an additional 24 months if graduating with a STEM degree from a US university. Generally, if you're in a medical degree program, professional degrees like medicine are not considered STEM degrees, so they're not eligible for that additional 24 months. But you may have done a PhD in a STEM field or a master's in a STEM field in the United States, and that may make you eligible for an additional 24 months. A total of 36 months of optional practical training, under which you can do your clinical training. So there are fewer restrictions to the F1 OPT as long as you're performing an activity that's related to your field of study. And the application process and eligibility application process and eligibility is through the school of graduation. So the school that sponsored your F1 visa is the school that is the institution that will process your OPT along with the United States Citizenship and Immigration Service. Let me go on here. There's other less common visas, but it may apply to you. There's a specific visa. It's a free trade employment visa called the E3 for Australians. It will allow you to perform clinical duties. In some cases, when we have no other options, we will use O1 visa. The O1 is an extraordinary ability visa. It's called the a visa for Nobel Prize winners, but so it has a very high standard for being approved, but it is used from time to time in training programs, not usually for residencies, but it is something that may play a part in your future. You may also be in the United States in the non-immigrant status, but have applied for permanent residency, and you may have work authorization based on that application. Likewise, you may be an asylee or refugee in the United States, or under temporary protected status, TPS, or you may be a document beneficiary. And we have at UCSF, we have trainees in all those different categories. So that might be applicable to you. Two visa categories that are that exclude clinical training would be the TN for Canadian and Mexican citizens, which only allows patient contact for teaching positions. So it's something, it's just not used for training. And then you may have a B visa in your passport, which is either for business or tourism, but that's not appropriate for training. So, just in case, a lot of people tell me, I have a B visa. I have a visa. It's a B visa, but that's not applicable for clinical training. So we're going to take a deeper dive into the J1 alien physician key requirements. And I just want to say, everyone hates the J1 alien physician title. No one likes that category, but that's actually the category that Congress approved back in I think the 60s, that title of alien physician. So I hopefully that someday the Department of State will choose it to international medical graduate or something like that. No one likes hearing the words alien physician. But so as we discussed earlier, it's the only J visa category that permits unrestricted patient care and contact. The J research scholar or J intern, or they don't permit unrestricted care and contact. It can only be issued through ECFMG. It allows IMGs up to 7 years of training. There was one question about can we go longer than 7 years? And with specialty training and subspecialty training can last longer. So it is possible to extend, but you have to make a special request to the Department of State. ECSMG will have to make a special request to the Department of State. So let's say you're starting a new training program in your 6th year of eligibility, and you start a subspecialty training of 2 years. When you start that subspecialty training in your 6th year, you're going to have to apply to the Department of State. ECFMG is going to have to apply to the Department of State to grant any training beyond 7 years. Another key factor is it requires your home country to provide a statement of need for training directly to ECFMG. So a statement of need that your training is a skill that's needed in the home country, and it's usually done by the Department of Health. It's issued based on the contract year, so it needs to be updated annually. It allows only employment as required by the training program, so there's no moonlighting allowed, and that's a big difference between U.S. citizens and residents and IMGs. So it's something to keep in consideration. But one of the
Brian, I just want to, for those who are not familiar with what moonlighting is, it's when you're getting paid to do extra hours of physician work outside of your program. A lot of times you'll have, like, for example, emergency departments who will let you work at other clinics, urgent cares, and you'll get paid a lot more, which is why people love it. But unfortunately, like he's saying, this contract will not allow it.
Right. Thanks, Dr. August. Yeah, it's something. ECFMG has a long memo on their policy, so we'll be going to the ECFMG page shortly. But one of the, I think the big advantages for some people is that your dependent spouse may attain work authorization in the United States from the USCIS. So they can apply for an EAD card that will allow them to work. So for many people, that's considered a benefit. And that's different than H-1B status that doesn't have, doesn't allow spouses, doesn't have doesn't grant work authorization to spouses. So perhaps the number one question I get about the J program, the J alien physician category, is the 2-year home country rule. And so just briefly, what that rule is, it obligates the visitor to return to their home country or country of lawful permanent residence for at least 2 years before they're eligible to apply for H or L status or a permanent residency. A permanent residency, green card are synonymous. The U.S. Department of State may grant a waiver of that requirement from an interested government agency. Most commonly, we get HHS or waivers through the Health and Human Services. In some cases, we've filed a claim that the individual fear of prosecution waivers, a claim that the individual's departure from the United States will cause exceptional hardship to a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident. Or child, and it's something we have used, but it's something that's pretty strictly, it has a high burden of proof. And probably the most common waiver that we've seen is a request from a state public health department or its equivalent. For example, it's the Conrad 30 program. There are other programs, but each state gets 30 waivers a year. But these programs require the IMG to work 3 years in an HHS designated health professional shortage area, medically underserved area, or medically underserved population. So there are restrictions, but after 3 years, so if the waiver is granted, it's requested by your training institution through the state. If it's granted, then you can transition to an H-1B visa and you can work 3 years. 3 years of service, and then you're unrestricted. You've fulfilled the waiver. Okay, so in general, I'll walk you through the process, and we'll go through the checklist, the ECFMG. But basically, it starts. Sorry, the application process. You've already all been certified through ECFMG. Once you're accepted to a training program, you and your training program liaison, your TPL, should initiate the training program coordinator, sorry, should initiate the visa request with the TPL for your training institution. The TPL will review the documents and submit them to ECFMG on behalf of the program. They call it creating a profile. And then once the application is approved by ECFMG, you'll receive an email requiring, the profile is approved by ECFMG. You'll receive an email requiring you to complete the application through OASIS, your portal into ECFMG. When you complete your portion and pay the fee, the ECFMG fee, they'll send a DS 2019 form usually to TPL for the physician to apply for a visa for your visa abroad. So you'll use that DS 2019 to apply for the visa abroad. Generally, the ECFMG will send it to us, the TPL, and unless it's otherwise requested to be sent directly to you. So we're going to go over the checklists. Dr. Gus, how are we doing on time, roughly? I want to look up my watch.
Halfway
through. I think we're doing great. So let me. I just want to talk about a few things. We're going to go to the ECFMG checklists. So it's important when you're looking at those checklists. What's often confusing for IMGs is, is my program initial or continuing? If this is your first J1 alien physician application, then it's always initial. The continuing will be, any subsequent petition after you start the initial one. Even if you go to other training programs, it will always be continuing. And then the question is non-standard, standard or non-standard. Residency programs are, for this purpose, standard means ACGME or ABMS approved and certified. Non-standard means ABMS board recognized, so subspecialty training that's recognized by the board, but not necessarily needs to be approved or certified. So let's go to, I think I'm gonna get out of that. So let me stop share. I'm gonna go to the browser and we'll go to, all right. So we'll go to the ECFMG. Let me go back. 2 years in, I think I should know Zoom by now. It's always, here we go. So I'm sure you're all familiar with the ECFMG website, but you know, I think you may not have already visited the immigration information, the Exchange Visitor Program information, EVP, which is from the start page. It's through programs, Exchange Visitor Program information. And this is a lot of information. It's hard to read all the way through it, but it explains the process for applying through ECFMG. Probably, you know, the most helpful place is to click down here on the application checklists, and we'll click on that. And for all of you starting a residency program, it should be this initial application checklist. So we'll hit on that. Okay. And it's important to read this checklist. ECFMG is very literal. So when presenting documents, it's really good just to be as thorough as possible and make sure for each of the points they're asking for that you know, you're providing specifically what they've asked for. The most important thing is your contract or a letter of offer that you'll receive once you match to your program.
I just want to interject really quickly, please, and let everyone know that after match day, everyone will receive, like, very relatively quickly, will receive that match, the contract in their email. So read it, because you got a timeline that you got to hustle with this, with the visa stuff. So read it, sign it, and return it so you can have it complete. Know that the fact that you matched, you're already obligated to sign the contract anyway. You actually don't really have a choice, so you might as well just sign it and submit it back.
That's great advice. Thanks. You know, almost all training programs make sure that the letters are ECFMG compliant, but it's always good to look for these specific factors. And if it's not in the letter itself, you may want to just ask the program coordinator to make sure the letter is compliant for ECFMG purposes. Of course, as we mentioned before, the statement of need, usually from your Ministry of Health. So I think one thing you can do right now is to contact your home country or country of law for permanent residence Ministry of Health to understand the statement of need process, how long it will take them to issue the letter. They're generally efficient. They're generally quick. The letter needs to be sent directly to ECFMG, so it won't be sent to you. You'll get a copy generally, but so it's really important. Most countries are very good at issuing the letter to be compliant with what's required of ECFMG. We're not going to talk about subspecialty program training. A current CV is required, so if you don't have one ready to go, you probably should. And then a copy of your passport. If your passport's going to expire soon, you may want to apply for a new passport as well. You're supposed to have at least 6 months of validity upon entry to the United States. So you should also check the expiration date on your passport. Okay, the additional documents, if you've ever been in the United States in J status, you'll need to supply copies of any previous DS 2019 issued. If you're a resident of a country that differs from your citizenship, you'll need to show proof that you're a legal permanent resident of that country. If you're in the United States, let's say in another non-immigrant status, you'll need to show your I-94 arrival card that you can download from the Customs and Border Protection. Official funding source, if it's not in your offer letter, if it's not through your program, then you'll need to show which outside organization was sponsoring you, and provide a letter. And then also, if you're doing, in the rare case, you're doing personal funds, you should submit a letter signed by a bank official in this format. And it's important to look at the minimums if you're self-funding too. ECFMG has $1,600 a month for exchange visitors and $600 a month for spouse, $400 per a month for any child. If you're you can have dependents, so you can bring dependents, your spouse and any minor children under the age of 21. But you do have to have evidence of family relationship, and then the return label, that's something each school does differently, but it's optional. So you should check with your TPL or training program about how they want to handle the return label. If you graduated from LCME accredited US or Canadian medical school program, you'll need these documents as well. And then finally, in case you're changing from, like I say, a JA Research Scholar program, you'll need the change of category request documentation. So that's the checklist, and it's really important to just try to see how many of those documents you can gather beforehand. The other thing I want to point out are the fees that you'll need to pay. Generally, these are not handled by your training program. These are fees that you will be responsible for, but you'll have to pay a fee to the Department of Homeland Security it's basically covering the cost of the database and the issuance of the DS 2019 forms called the CVIS fee, which is $220. Then you'll have to pay a fee to the Department of State, which is usually online, of $160. And then there may be other fees as well, depending on your country of residence. And then finally, ECFMG fees, you're going to have to, when your TPL submits the program profile, you're going to need to pay a fee in OASIS of $370. So those are the fees. So I'd recommend, I have this in the links, just reading through the ECFMG exchange visitor program page, because there's a lot of good information in that. So let me go back, and I should just share my desktop. Go back to the, okay. So just typically, because we're a lot of questions about timing. So the time from the match to the TPL submission of the application varies by institution. You can help speed things along by requesting a statement of need from your home country to be sent to ECFMG, prepare a dossier of all required documents for the TPL to use, promptly paying the application fee and OASIS after TPL creates the profile. Once it's submitted, once you've completed and submitted to ECFMG, ECFMG requests up to 60 days to process the request. But in April, they just turn these out, sometimes a week, sometimes 2 weeks, but they do it very quickly. Still, always being early is going to help you, especially if you're outside of the United States and you need to acquire a visa. So you'll then pay the visa, CVIS and visa fee, and make an appointment to the U.S. Department of State. In the links I gave you, I've given you a link to the Department of State visa wait times. I just want to say that even with the pandemic, the U.S. Department of State has given priority for the match for initial IMGs coming to the United States. So you should be a priority at the consulate if you're entering the United States for clinical training. It's one thing the U.S. has given priority over the last 2 years, and there's always a memo sent out by the Department of State to consulates right before in the spring, mentioning the priority. So you should be, in the last few years, we've been able to get people here. In 2020, we had a few people delayed. by a week or two, but we managed to get everyone here. That is good news. If you do get the visa from the consulate, you can enter up to 30 days before the start date on your DS 2019. So those are the good news. We're gonna jump in. I don't have much on the H-1B, but just you'll find that that in most training programs will allow H-1B in general if someone is completing their first year of OPT or they've been in the United States in F1 status. They're usually more generous and to allowing H-1B status. It's a little bit different than the J-1, so you can't have outside funding. You must be a salaried employee of the institution, so you can't be self-funded in H-1B status. You can't have a home country institution pay you directly. You have to be a salaried employee of the institution. Application fees are much higher than for the J. At a minimum, it's $3,460, and they must be paid by the employer. So you can't offer to pay for the H-1B application fees. As we mentioned previously, it's a dual intent visa, meaning you may also apply for U.S. permanent residency if you're eligible to do so. One thing that's always often a question, if you do 6 years of H-1B timed training, there are often fewer options for employers to sponsor immigration after your status ends. So if you plan on just completing your residency, then an employer would have enough time to apply for H-1B. But if you want to do specialty or subspecialty training, then and use that full 6 years in training, H-1B, there's less options for employers after you finish your training. And then another contrast with J-1, H-4 dependent can't normally obtain work authorization. So in general, I'm going to tell you about our process at UCSF. Every school is going to be different. So every institution is going to be different in how they process it, the H-1B. But just as an example, we're going to use UCSF. So we allow training programs to sponsor H-1B. This was a change we had about 5 years ago for anyone as a recruitment tool. So each department can choose. Some departments don't sponsor H-1B, but many do with GME approval. Once someone's accepted into the program, host department submits to our office the H-1B request forms and the fee form at least 3 months in advance before the training start date. The ISSO our office will review and submit the H-1B petition process to the United States citizenship on behalf of UCSF. These days, we always have to use the premium processing, paying an extra fee for the USCIS to approve, deny, or request evidence within 15 days. And then once the application is approved by the USCIS, the physician is eligible to begin employment. But if they're abroad, then they will have to get an H-1B visa stamp from the U.S. Embassy before they can enter the United States to begin their training. And in general, H-1B process applications are usually about 100 pages of documents. So on average, and we also have to get approval from the Department of Labor, a fair wage determination from the Department of Labor, which takes a couple weeks at least. So they're generally significantly longer to process than the J-1 applications. Okay.
Sorry, one
please,
thing.
Yeah, no, please jump in.
So I just want to keep you guys back into the frame that we have. Most of you probably are going through the match, and so everyone knows in March sometime. I don't remember exactly what the date is this year, but you know in March where you're going to match, and most people start on July 1st. A majority of residents start on July 1st, so it's about a 4-month window. But it's still kind of tight. It gives you a little bit of flexibility, but I still suggest that you start as early as possible.
Yeah, early as possible. And it's often these administrative details that are have a way of snowballing. So it's best to start, as early as you can and get the documents you need together. So that's great advice. I'm happy to jump into the questions if you like. These are the pre-received questions we have, and then we can take any questions we still have time for. But the first question is a good question. Can I go to any embassy in the world to get the visa, or do I have to go back home? For J visas in general, it's best to do it from your home country or country of lawful permanent residence, because it shows the intent. It shows that you have ties to your home country. So we generally recommend people go to their home country. Also, Canada is heavily impacted. A lot of people say, I just want to go to Canada and do it. Canada is pretty heavily impacted for visa issuance. So I wouldn't, it could take 3 or 4 months to get an appointment in Canada. So in general, it's better to go back to your home country, but you can work with your TPL and ask the question for your specific circumstance. When should we start contacting the program concerning this once we match? I think our recommendation is to do it before, while you can still contact the programs and understand what's available to you, what the program would offer in terms of immigration, and understand their unique the unique camp institutional processes. Would you agree, Dr. August? Is that because you were mentioning that now at this point people can still contact programs, and I'm not sure when they're not allowed to.
I believe once the ranking opens.
Yeah. So before the ranking, you can try of the schools that of the institutions you're hoping to match, to try to talk to the program coordinators, understand what their local process is for processing either H or J visas. And we just addressed this, but because of COVID, there's a lot of backlog getting visa interview dates. How do we navigate this in time to start a residency? In general, getting the enabling documents as soon as possible, either the DS 2019 or H-1B approval notice, is the most important factor, and then making an appointment with the consulate. You can't make the appointment with the consulate until you actually have those documents in hand. But as I mentioned earlier, the U.S. is giving preference to IMGs in recognition of how important your contributions are to our public health. Everything regarding the application to Canadian citizen, everything applies to Canadians except the need to actually get a visa stamp in their passport. Canadians and Bermudans are exempt from the visa stamp requirement. You still have to get a DS 2019, pay the DS 2019 fees. You still have to get an H-1B approval, but you don't have to go to U.S. consulate in Canada to get a visa stamp. You can, once you have those approval documents, you can enter the United States. You can come to the border and enter, and that's for Canadian citizens only, not lawful permanent residents of Canada or non-Canadian citizens doing training in Canada. It's specifically a benefit for Canadian and Bermudan citizens. Only 2 countries in the world the U.S. has that requirement, that doesn't require a visa for. The next question, how do we convert an F1 student visa to a J visa? How to convert F1 status to H-1B? In most cases, it's going to be faster. Once you work with your training program, decide which visa you're going to use, that once the enabling documents are granted, that you are given to you, that you will go to a consulate abroad, because changing status, what we call changing status in the United States right now, can take 6 to 8 months. So it's too long, and you wouldn't be able to begin your training program. So generally we recommend travel, but it's something you should work with your travel, obtain the visa stamp, and then re-entering in the new status. Remember, you can generally use your OPT, the first year of OPT, and then 6 months before, depending on what you've agreed upon with your training program can begin the training institution can begin the H-1B for you. Most training programs don't offer H-1Bs straight away. They want people to utilize their OPT, but it's specific to each training program, training institution. This is a tricky one. Number 6, can my spouse file an immigrant petition for me after I come with a J visa? Very specifically, no. So I would encourage the person to ask this question to talk to an immigration attorney, because the consequence of entering in J alien physician status is being subject to that bar. And even if you have a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident spouse, you still have to overcome that bar before you can apply for a green card. So that may determine if you to choose to defer the match this year or not. So you may want to talk about to an attorney about the possibility of your spouse filing an immigrant petition and then you entering the United States once that's approved to begin training. So, but an attorney can help you navigate that. Specifically, the process in Nigeria for a J1 H1B is the same. Let me try to close this so I can't read it. And the transition from one visa type to another following commencement of residency in the United States. Again, if you're subject to that tier rule, there's not too many options for you. There may be the O1 to continue if you're in H1B status and you have eligibility left. If you go to an academic medical center, then the academic medical center can sponsor you. If you go to hospital or clinic, they may not be able to sponsor you in H1B status because this is an important factor for post training. The United States limits H1B visas to roughly 65,000 each year, and for industry. So higher education is exempt. So if you're in an academic medical center, we can apply for H1Bs all year round. There's no cap. But if you're at a hospital or a clinic that is subject to the cap, then it's difficult for them to apply for H1B under the cap, because usually there's only 65,000 visas a year. Each year, about 300,000 people apply in industry for H1Bs. But again, depending on your stature, then there might be other types of visas available to you afterwards. So but that's the issue with for H1Bs after you finished your training. We talked about how the steps and timeline of once you've matched. We talked about training period is 7 years and you want to do fellowships after, you can, as long as it's clear, as long as the Department of State approves. It is the answer to that question. If you're on a J2 visa, how hard is it to move to your own J1? The Department of State will consider a change of category from J2 to J1 alien physician, specifically to J1 alien physician. And that's something you would work with ECFMG on if you're in the United States. They would change your J category from J2 to J1, or it might be a matter of leaving the United States and re-entering. Process for either program versus ECFMG sponsored. So as we mentioned before, there are other J programs, but they can't be issued J categories, research scholar, intern, camp counselor. There's a lot of J categories, but none of them allow clinical training. So only the J1 alien physician allow. ECFMG sponsored J1 allows clinical training. Can I start my residency while I'm in OPT? Sure. And I think most programs prefer that you do that. Well, if you have an MPH in data science, you may be eligible for that 36 months of OPT, because MPH is not generally considered a STEM degree, but if it's in data science, it might be considered a STEM degree. So you should talk to the international student advisor at your school to make sure that your degree is a STEM degree. In that case, you would have up to 3 years of optional practical training for you. So then finally, which working visa gives the possibility of U.S. residency? Again, pretty much the H-1B is the only non-immigrant visa that allows you to be on a non-immigrant track. As your stature improves, as you may work on clinical research, you may get more notoriety. You may be eligible for O visas as well, and O visa would also allow you to be on an immigrant track to the United States. Okay, so those are the pre-submitted questions. And I can take other questions. We have a few minutes left, I believe. Wow, just 3 minutes left.
There was a question. Someone just wanted to know a little bit more about the H4.
So H4 doesn't normally allow someone to hold work authorization in the United States, only in a very specific case, and that's if they have a pending, if their H-1B spouse has a pending petition, a green card petition, but they can't. So they have the approved first part, but they can't adjust status because the green card, the final green card, because the U.S. limits the number of green cards each year per country. So it only certain countries, how do I say it? It only allows a certain number of immigrant visas per country. So specifically India and China have long waiting lists. And so H-4 work authorization in general is only really allowable if your spouse is a pending green card petition and you can't adjust status. So, and that generally affects Indian and Chinese citizens the most. So otherwise, H-4s are not eligible for work authorization. That doesn't mean you can get your own work authorization. You can find an employer to apply for work authorization in the United States. If it's an academic employer, they're not subject to that H-1B cap. But if you can't use H-4 work authorization to, excuse me, H-4 status as work authorization, you have to have that specific work authorization and that specific criteria. Or you can get your own H-1B. You can ask for your own H-1B.
All right, there's a question in the chat, and the person wants to know if they're on an F1 visa and they don't have OPT because their school is for prep course, is there a way around this for residency?
No, unfortunately, OPT is only available for bachelor's degrees and higher. So prep courses and English language courses don't allow optional practical training. So your option would be basically on acceptance the same as someone who's not in the United States in F1 status, and that would be the J alien physician or H-1B. So
well, we're right on the end. Wow. I'm sorry, there was like one. Oh, now suddenly I'm getting these other.
I'm happy to stay on. I'm not.
Okay,
I can stay on a few more minutes.
We'll answer these last two. Okay, so here's a question. If I apply for a J1 at a consulate outside of my home country, do I subsequently need to return to that same country every time I renew my J1?
No. If it's granted, you're not limited to just applying in your home country. So again, if you're from Nigeria, a lot of Nigerians have contacts in the UK. A lot of Nigerians have family in the UK. They spend a lot of time in the UK. You can apply at that consulate in the UK sometimes, but your application is stronger because the law reads you have to have ties to your home country. So it's better, it strengthens your application to go back to Lagos and apply, not to do it in the UK. But that doesn't mean if you got your visa in the UK, you're not limited to only getting your extension, subsequent visa stamps in the UK.
Okay, so I have this question. If I have a H4 EAD can I apply for residency? Is clinical work allowed on EAD?
Yes, in general, unless you're GME or has a specific prohibition on it. So I'm sorry, this is an H4 EAD specifically?
Yeah, it says they have an H4
Awesome.
EAD.
So that's great. It's unrestricted. That is the H4 is unrestricted. Again, your training program may have specific prohibitions on other visa types, but we would accept training in H4 status if for those who hold the EAD.
And by you mean at the University of
UCSF.
California.
Yeah.
So this last question says, if you come in with a J1 and you get married to an American citizen, can you process for the green card?
No, this is why it's really important right now. And this is a common scenario. I don't know if everybody wants to marry Americans or what, but this is something we encounter a lot. In the obstacle to getting a waiver, you would need to get a waiver first. So usually when I get this question, if you have a U.S. fiance, either a permanent resident or a U.S. citizen fiance, probably talk to a lawyer right now, because it's really hard. In the last year, we've had 2 trainees actually have to go home for 2 years. They couldn't find another, so they were separated from their spouse for 2 years because of that 2-year home country rule. So you may want to talk to an attorney. I suggest you talk to an attorney about what you can do, how your spouse can file, or a fiance can file for permanent residency for you before you start the program. If your relationship's at that stage, this is where immigration advice and relationship advice sometimes get conflated. But I think the best thing you can do is talk to an attorney, because the impact of being subject to that 2-year rule makes it very difficult, to practically prohibits a filing of a permanent residency on your behalf if you've accepted J1, the alien physician status, and unless you fulfilled the requirement or you've gotten a waiver.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Ryan. This has been very informational. Lots of great nuggets throughout this presentation that I think a lot of people are going to appreciate. For those of you who did not see this, I'm going to paste it again. There's a link to a survey. I will collect, if you fill out the survey, it's just 2 questions to get feedback on the presentation. But in that survey, we do get your email address. And so if you fill out that survey, then we can send you a link to the slides as well as the video. So I know that was one of the questions somebody asked. So I just want to let you know that option is available. But thank you again. I can't appreciate enough for you for doing this for us.
It's enjoyable, and I hope to meet all of you at UCSF sometime in the future. I just hope if anybody's applying for UCSF, please reach out to me directly. I'd be happy to talk to you.
Oh, look at that. You want to put your email in the?
Yeah, I'll put it on this. Oh yeah, sure. There you go. Great. So yeah, if you're applying to UCSF, I'm happy to talk about your options at UCSF.
Okay, well, thank you guys. I am going to 11:05.
Oh, sorry. I think I didn't send it to the group. I sent it. There you go. Well, that's I'll try it one more time.
Nope, I see it. Oh, wait.
That's a conflation of my personal address and my work address. There you go. That's the one.
Okay, use the second one, guys.
Second one.
The second one is the more appropriate email address.
Yeah.
So again, we'll send this all to everyone. I'll give you guys a couple of seconds to copy that email address, and then I'm going to close the session. Thank you again. So long, everyone.
All right, everyone, good luck.